Welcome to What Brought You Here Today, an interview-style mental health podcast that focuses on real experiences and how we navigate and move through them. The guests on this show provide personal and professional insight at times and come from all walks of life. Not all of the guests work in the mental health field, and they've all chosen to be brave and vulnerable while sharing parts of their story with you. Please keep your own mental health and well-being in mind while listening. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to What Brought You Here Today. I am your host, Ryan, and today I am joined by Erin, a therapist here in the Minneapolis community to talk about all things OCD.
Woohoo.
Erin, why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself, and thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. So, my name is Erin Venker. I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor based in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And I got into treating people with OCD after I went untreated. Let's see, on average, they say it takes, 14 to 17 years before people are, one, properly diagnosed, and two, get the right form of treatment for OCD. And so I was part of that statistic where I was diagnosed fairly early in life, but I didn't get the appropriate treatment till I was in my mid 20s. And really, the veil was lifted, and I really started to understand more about what OCD is and how it showed up in various points in my life. And then it just became a passion to spread awareness and to treat people with OCD. And yeah, it's been expanding from there.
Yeah, that's so incredible. I had no idea that can take that long.
Yes, it's so I see clients of all ages coming in, and now that there's greater awareness for what OCD actually is beyond hand washing, repetitive behaviors, I have people of all ages coming in say, I never knew in their 40s, 50s, 60s, like I've been suffering from this for ages and I just didn't know what it was.
Yeah. Let's maybe dive into that a little bit. How do we categorize or talk about the difference between typical obsessive compulsive disorder symptoms versus maybe just like a above normal hand washing or
Right.
concerns with orderliness thing? I have a
Yeah.
4-year-old who likes to wash her hands.
Right, totally, totally. So breaking it down, like obsessions are unwanted, first of all, and distressing, intrusive thoughts, images, feelings, really anything under the sun can become an obsession for OCD, anything, as long as it's like distressing and unwanted. And then the repetitive behaviors or rituals, those are the compulsions that people do to alleviate the anxiety of the obsessions. So if we take like the quote unquote, for lack of a better term, classic form of OCD that people know best. If somebody touches something that they feel like is dirty and then they get obsessed and distressed with it, of either feeling dirty or fear of getting a disease, and they have to wash their hands. But the difference with people with OCD is that our brains are wired in a way where we don't get the all clear signal. So while somebody might use the bathroom and then wash their hands and then they're like, cool, I feel clean, I can go about my way. Somebody with OCD doesn't get that all clear signal. So they feel like they have to do an action repetitively to get rid of the anxiety or the fear. But the clients that I primarily see, I definitely see clients with contamination OCD. But what is misunderstood about OCD is there's so many different kinds of themes that an individual can have with OCD. So while contamination OCD is definitely a big part of it, a lot of clients suffer from mental intrusive thoughts. So, and that can show up in like harm OCD, what we call, so like intrusive, unwanted thoughts of harming somebody, like fear of being a serial killer, unwanted sexual intrusive thoughts. A really big theme that I see is pedophilia OCD, so fear of being a pedophile. And people with OCD, they are not at all in any way, shape, or form like a threat to society with their intrusive, distressing thoughts because they are unwanted or what we call ego dystonic. So they're against how they view themselves to be or their value systems. So they're not ego syntonic. So does that make sense? Yeah, ego dystonic. And they'll do everything under the sun to either try to figure out their obsession. Am I a bad person? Would I do this bad thing? Or to make sure they don't do it, like avoiding knives or avoiding children because of that fear. But then it just it starts to build up in your brain. And the more you behave in compulsions, the more your brain starts to believe that these obsessions are true.
Okay. Whoa. Yeah, sorry. I just laid it all out there. Whoa. Yeah.
There's a lot to OCD. It's so complex and complicated. I'm still learning more and more about it, but yeah, I could talk about it for days.
How come it's shifting now? Like, what is bringing the awareness? What is shifting it? Personally, I had and have intrusive thoughts around motherhood and parenting.
Yeah.
My diagnosis has always been like postnatal, perinatal anxiety.
Yep.
No, I know because I'm a professional. Like we're beyond the anxiety point
Right.
in certain situations. But so no one's ever told me that. But what is bringing the awareness to more OCD and the differences now versus
Yeah.
in the past?
Totally. Well, I think now that there's more of an so I think there was years ago, there was a, oh gosh, what was his name? Of course, I'm not going to remember his name right now, but there was a psychologist who coined the term pure O, meaning like purely obsessional kind of OCD or OCD that's just in your head in the sense of intrusive thoughts, images. Rumination is a big one. So trying to figure something out, thinking about things over and over again. So he coined the term pure O, which even though it's called purely obsessional OCD, there still are compulsions to it. They're just all mental compulsions. So I think after that term was coined, then people were like, oh, this is what I have. I don't do physical compulsions. All my compulsions are mental. And then I think like with the rise of like social media, fortunately, like Instagram, YouTube, there's just been a lot of people that have been able to come forward and speak about their experience and speak very openly and very honestly about it. And that's just since then, I think it's just really grown. But fortunately, I think that, yeah, the raised awareness is in large part to social media.
Yeah. I think, yeah, social media has raised so much awareness for a lot of things in mental health, like good and bad. Right.
Totally. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
I think like the main thing, like opening the door for the conversation to happen has been the biggest thing. And for people to start maybe being more inquisitive and curious about their symptoms versus just having the maybe baseline diagnosis of anxiety or depression. Like this feels like something more and something I'm relating to more than just anxious thoughts, because I definitely think there's the difference between anxious thoughts and like obsessive compulsive thoughts, right? Which is what you're saying.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, with the obsessive compulsive thoughts, it really becomes debilitating. It can really be debilitating for people. And a lot of times, the anxious thoughts or generalized anxiety disorder is more like general day to day life anxieties, whereas OCD, like they're very much distorted. So, and clients can recognize that like their fears are distorted or very unlikely, but it's like the possibility versus the probability. It's what anything is possible. So what if? I hear
Mhm.
the words if all the time
Yeah.
when treating people because you can come up with a million different scenarios and possibilities of bad things that can happen. And individuals with OCD just get really stuck in that loop.
Okay. How do you help them navigate out of the what is?
Yeah. So there's a couple of different treatments for OCD. So the first one that was coined the gold standard of treating OCD was exposure and response prevention therapy. And so that involved having people kind of face whatever their fear was and then resist doing the compulsions. So again, if we do the hand washing example, touching something that feels contaminated and then resisting doing the hand washing or other safety behaviors like ruminating about something. So that was like the gold standard of exposure and response prevention therapy, which has been very effective and helpful for a lot of people. Now there's another therapy that's come out called inference-based CBT, which is I love it. I think it's become like a controversy in like the OCD world, but I think it's a wonderful type of therapy that can really work well in conjunction with ERP. But basically, it talks about how individuals with OCD make incorrect inferences about information, and then they start telling themselves a story about that, and then get so convinced by that story. So it's trying to break down more of the cognitive distortion and the inferential confusion that happens. So for example, if I'm like chopping vegetables and I get an intrusive thought about stabbing my husband, which happens, my immediate thought is going to be like, oh, okay, weird thought. I know I'm not actually going to stab him some days. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. But then somebody with OCD, with harm OCD, would go, oh my gosh, why did I have that thought? Does that mean I'm a bad person? What if, what if, what if? Now I need to hide the knives. I need to obsessively research serial killers to make sure I'm not one. And that really is seated in a doubt about themselves or what ICBT calls like the feared vulnerable self. So they already have this fear of being a bad person. So when they get an intrusive thought, then they have this inferential confusion and put this inference of the meaning of that thought. Oh, that must mean I'm a bad person. Whereas no, it's just a thought. It's just a thought, but you're assigning meaning to the thoughts.
Yeah. How so the ICBT is newer, right? I feel like I've been seeing a lot of ERP and like that popping up everywhere and people like requesting specifically for that for therapeutic purposes and, leaning more what's the word I'm looking for? Like more directed approaches.
Mhm.
Um if someone is just like maybe being it is diagnosed as anxiety and they're like not being treatment's not being affected or effective, what is the next step in I feel like in our field, maybe there's like some underreporting or overreporting and things aren't always what they seem. But what would be the next step if someone is having anxious thoughts that aren't being treated by normal standard talk therapy, we'll say? How do we know to go to the next step?
Yeah, definitely. Because talk therapy actually makes OCD worse. It makes
Okay.
it worse because it becomes like a reassurance cycle and also just like engaging with the compulsion of talking about it so much.
Okay.
So it's really behavioral therapy is what's really needed for OCD because it breaks down what is happening mentally with the intrusive thoughts, and then teaching your brain how to respond to those thoughts differently. And really, a lot of that is disengagement from the thoughts or habituating to the content of those thoughts so they don't like create such a dramatic punch of anxiety. So really it's like shifting away from the content of the thoughts themselves and more exploring shifting away from the content of itself and more exploring like the behaviors around those thoughts.
Okay. Okay. That's so helpful to know. I don't treat a lot of people with OCD and yeah, I think I would have not that wouldn't have been my first thought that talk therapy reinforces
Yeah,
what they're
yeah.
experiencing.
Totally. And this is where people go so underdiagnosed, or this is why it takes 14 to 17 years because people are like, well, I've been in therapy for all this time. I'm like, well, what kind of therapy were you getting? And if it's talk there, it's like those probably feeding into the obsessions, those probably feeding into the compulsive behavior, probably getting reassurance from your therapist unknowingly and then feeling better. But then, like, the seeing your therapist could almost turn into a compulsion in and of itself.
Okay. How frustrating.
Yeah. I know. And a lot of people, really mourn and grieve, like, parts of their lives lost from OCD, because really it robs people of years and years of their lives. So yeah, like, how frustrating for sure. I see so many clients who just feel one, I feel relieved that, like, now they're getting the proper treatment and being understood, but then also it's, "Oh my gosh," like, what my life could have been like had I not been stuck under the thumb of OCD for such a long time. So yeah, so there's a lot of grief in the OCD community.
Yeah, I can imagine. I don't know why this is popping into my head right now, but I'm curious, like, if executive functioning is impacted by OCD and like what I also feel like there's been a huge uprise in like ADHD thanks to social
Yeah.
media. But I'm like,
Okay.
how is executive functioning and just maybe our day to day functioning impacted by that?
Oh, for sure. No, that's a great question. So, like, ADHD, autism, and OCD like hold hands. Like, they are very
Okay.
comorbid with each other. So, I have OCD and I have ADHD. Now that I am aware more of what autism is, and I'm starting to see more autistic traits and more autism in my clients too. That should be another podcast though, is the
Yeah.
misunderstanding of autism, which is really interesting. But for executive functioning, I think when people's minds are on fire and they're just in survival mode, you're outside of your window of tolerance. And so you really cannot think rationally about anything because you're always in that state of fight freeze. So individuals with OCD for a long periods of time are like stuck in this survival mode where their amygdala is just on fire. So it is hard to think of anything rational. So if I have a client who has a fear of getting HIV from sitting on a toilet seat, for example, it's like I can, like, tell them rationally, "No, that's not possible, that's not gonna happen," but they can't access that frontal cortex part of their brain because there's the what if happening, and then their brain is signaling to them that there is an actual threat. So the brain is lying to them, essentially. The brain is tricking them.
Okay. So they're just like constantly in this like loop of not
Yeah.
maybe not getting things done and then maybe getting a lot of things done and not getting things done.
Yeah, I think, and this is where OCD is so diverse. It can show up in a lot of different ways.
Okay.
Sometimes people can use executive functioning or trying to get things done almost as like a distraction or a coping skill or self
Okay.
soothe. There's a lot of times people can be highly perfectionistic in OCD. And so keeping things perfect or in order can be a self soothe. Like I don't have control over what's happening in my brain, but I can control my environment. And this is how I'm going to control my environment. But yeah, so I think that people with OCD are highly intelligent, and usually OCD only impacts like a certain sliver of their lives, or like they might have certain themes that feel very loud to them. And OCD waxes and wanes, it can get really loud and get quiet and then loud. So it's chronic, it's not curable, but it's highly manageable.
Okay. How does perfectionism like fall under the umbrella of OCD, or is there also differences there?
Yeah, so perfectionism definitely does. And there's different kind of like types of perfectionism under OCD. So there might be perfectionism again in your physical environment, so making things feel and look perfect. But there might also even be like some mental perfectionism too. So like remembering things perfectly or saying something perfectly so you're perfectly understood. So perfectionism can show up in yeah, so many different areas of OCD, not just
Okay.
one. So, like, I am perfectionistic in the way of, like, I'm not physical perfectionism. I'm in a mess and chaos all the time. I'm very messy, but I do have certain perfectionism when it comes to communicating with people perfectly or making sure I'm not saying something that's going to offend them. So I have to say it just right. So perfectionism, and then also what they call like just right OCD, or making it feel, yeah, making things feel like just right. Those can also overlap too.
Okay. How does that impact your work as a therapist when we're just talking all the time?
I need a lot of naps.
Yeah, that's fair. I've also, as you're talking, like thinking about, I work with a lot of 2E kids who are like so highly gifted. And
Yeah.
I think their speech, maybe because of their intelligence, comes a little more easily. But also, I find the perfectionism is often a little skewed higher in that
Right.
route, in that way. But just like the workload of having to make sure that we're not offending people, that we're not hurting feelings, like that, that
Yeah. Oh,
seems
yeah.
exhausting.
Totally, totally. Fortunately, that's an area of my own OCD that I've gotten a lot better at is like relinquishing control and knowing that I'll always say things with the best of intention, but I'm human. I'm not going to say things perfectly. And usually, my fear of how something is going to land for somebody is not how it's landing at all. That's the imaginal story that I'm creating in my head because I have a core fear of people being mad at me, people not liking me, therefore being a bad person. So that kind of feared vulnerable self shifted. So that's not so much of an obsession of mine anymore. Or if it is one that kind of pops up, like, oh my gosh, did I make somebody mad? Did I piss them on? Did I piss them off? I'm able to, oh, there's like the OCD coming up. But in general, like working with OCD clients, it's very messy. We're doing
Yeah.
messy things. We're doing, confronting distortions. We're touching toilets. We are going out into the world and driving. We're doing weird exposures, like holding knives. There's just a ton of different stuff going on. Yeah, I have a big
I
knife.
feel like I can't imagine what your office looks like.
Oh yeah, there's like fake blood, fake poop, knives, like all different types of stuff. It's
I
it's
love it.
really fun too. Yeah, it's good. So, and really working with OCD clients, they're wonderful. Like in general, they're just really lovely people to work with. And they're along for the ride for the most part.
Yeah. How, this is maybe a little bit of a selfish question. And I work with a lot with parents, a lot with moms who
Mhm.
like anxious cleaning, rage cleaning. And I think I understand the difference. But for someone who feels like where is the line between obsessively cleaning and wanting things to be orderly and in a nice way versus I'm cleaning to manage my anxiety because the clutter's too much.
Yeah,
Maybe that's the line.
yeah, I think like the inability to stop. The
Okay.
inability to stop and also the inability to sit with mess or to sit with something that is distressing. And really with that kind, it can be about control. So I would say, yeah, just the inability to be in that discomfort. And usually, when people are doing something like hyper cleaning, they're doing it for another reason. So they're doing it for to relieve anxiety or for control or for because of contamination reasons or whatever it might be. So it's well, what's underneath that cleaning?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting. I had an appointment with my own personal therapist a couple weeks ago, and she's, what happens when you get really upset and angry? I was like, oh, I stopped talking and I rage clean my house. She was like, okay, really? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, how do you feel after? I was like, amazing.
And, and see, I think that can be like a somatic healthy discharge. You know what I mean? Like that's doing something like working out or rage cleaning. Like that's a good discharge of our anxiety and of our anger and of our emotions. When somebody's OCD isn't like rage cleaning, it is like distressing and uncomfortable. So even if people
Yeah.
do clean a bunch, like they still don't feel better afterwards, or there's still that anxiety that lingers. And usually because there's some sort of core fear beyond that.
Yeah. And I have a parent who has pretty significant OCD around cleaning constantly. And it's the older I get, the I feel like I get a little more concerned that I'm starting to pick up some of these tendencies. Is it genetic, hereditary? Do we pass it down?
Yeah, yeah. So it is genetic and
Okay.
hereditary. And so there's a couple parts of it. So one, there are like neurochemical differences in somebody with OCD. So I'm definitely somebody who's on the medication train. Medication can, I think, is a huge important component of OCD treatment and therapy. I've never had one client regret going on medication. So partly it's that, yeah. So partly it's that it's genetic. Like I know my mom has OCD, my grandmother has OCD and was autistic. ADHD runs in my family. But then also it can be, to a certain extent, it can also be environmental. It
Okay.
just if you're raised really rigid or if you're raised, so it's never just environmental. There's always that neurochemical or kind of brain component to it. But if you are raised like in a very strict or like black and white background, or if there's like a lot of moral scrupulosity, that can be really difficult to break apart because really the biggest core fear of somebody with OCD is being a bad person. What if I'm a bad person? I need to make sure I do everything under the sun to make sure I'm not bad and I'm not responsible for anything bad happening. So I have to, like, I've seen clients, for example, who obsessively clean because they're so afraid that there's going to be nut residue in their house. And then somebody's going to come into their house and then, somebody with a horrible nut allergy is going to come into their home and then they're going to be responsible for this person dying from the nut allergy. So this is like where the obsession comes. I'm responsible for this bad thing happening because I didn't do it, because I didn't clean enough, because I didn't clean myself enough when I left the house. So I have like nut residue on my hands. And then somebody violently died because of me. So this is like the story that people with OCD can create. But
Spiraling.
back to that moral scrupulosity can be like either all good or all bad. Well, I can't do any of these things because that makes me a bad person. So we see a lot of like religious scrupulosity. Well, I can't give myself any grace or mental flexibility or anything because that might mean I'm immoral and bad.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Going back to the medication piece, first of all, listeners, we're not medication prescribers. We're not medical doctors. We're not psychiatrists. Okay. So if you do need medication or also need any kind of, or having any kind of concerns, please seek proper treatment. Um, is medication for OCD like a standard, like antidepressant, anti anxiety? Is it something different?
Yeah, so typically people will start out with an SSRI.
Okay.
Generally, SSRIs, a high dose of an SSRI is what individuals with OCD need. Of course, that medication doesn't work for everybody. And there are like a lot of different types of treatments now. So there's different medications. There's also transcranial magnetic stimulation for people who have really blocked OCD where medication doesn't seem to be effective. But how I describe it is it just when you have OCD, it's like you're stuck on a highway looping and you don't have an exit. There's no exit to be found. When you're on medication, it helps your brain find exits to get off that loop.
Okay. Okay. How do we build supports? How do we get a supportive community for people with OCD?
Yeah. I think one, like building in the understanding of what OCD is. I think OCD becomes an adjective or a trope or quirk. And really, that when it's treated in that way, it's so shaming to people who have just debilitating, just mental intrusive thoughts because they're like, oh, people just think I am washing my hands or just clean and blah, 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 blah. But they're in a mental hell. And so I think that keeps people from talking about their OCD because they just feel like people just see it as very one dimensional. So I think building awareness of what OCD actually is and all the different kind of everything that's under the umbrella of OCD, the different themes like harm OCD, pedophilia OCD, hyperresponsibility OCD, I mean, all these. And again, we could do a podcast on each one of these themes. They're so complex
So
and
many.
interesting, so many themes. So I think just like building in that understanding and listening because a lot of OCD can feel very taboo and people have a lot of shame talking about it. I'm very comfortable talking about all the different types of sexual and violent intrusive thoughts I've had because I just don't care anymore. And I've been treating it for so long, I know what it is. But I think having people being open to understanding what all that means. And yeah, so I think one, raising awareness, raising the conversation, and having people with OCD meet each other. I think that's one of the most therapeutic things is when people are like, oh, whoa, I'm not alone, but they're not. And I think people come in my couch and they sit in my office and they think that I'm just like, my boat's just going to be rocked with what they tell me. And I'm like, okay, yeah, whatever. And they're like, really? I'm like, I was like, I've seen 10 people like you today. Like,
Yeah.
so I think when they realize, oh, I'm not so other, that's just a huge relief.
Yeah. Do you get a lot of, is this normal?
Yes, all the time. And I would say I'll give them one assurance. I'll say, yes, this is normal. But then after that, I'm not going to reassure you anymore because that can become like, but am I normal? That can become a compulsion in and of itself.
Okay. Okay. I want to get into talking about like where OCD is headed in the future of it, but I have a question specifically about pans and pandas.
Yes.
And where is that falling? I worked at Children's Hospital a long time ago and remember, not a long time ago, it was probably like 5 or 6 years ago, but it was still pretty elusive and not a lot known about it. And now there's a lot more understanding and there's specialists here, especially in the metro area that work with this. And I have a client on my caseload who is experiencing some of these symptoms, but I'm curious like what your thoughts are and like where that's at with OCD.
Yeah, totally. So to be totally honest, like I'm not super familiar with pans and pandas. Like I'm no expert on it by any means, but I think that there is again greater awareness of it. I have a friend whose daughter has it too. So it's caused by like the strep. Well, the theory is it's caused by the strep infection, and then
Yeah.
somehow it affects the brain. And then, but from what I understand, is the symptoms are still very much OCD, and so I think that the treatment's the same. I could be wrong on that, but yeah, to be totally honest with you, I'm not as
Yeah.
familiar with pans and pandas. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I was just curious because I know when I was looking in like for a referral for this person, ERP was coming up as part of the process for it. And I think it's so difficult also because the OCD like symptoms only present when the strep virus is present. So
Right.
like how do you manage, and maybe that's a question for OCD overall, like when it does come and go, is treatment still effective?
Yeah, that's a
You know?
great question. I would think I have some clients who experience like higher OCD symptoms during like when their hormones are really high, so around the time of their period, or some clients experience more like OCD symptoms in the evening or some in the morning. So OCD kind of volume, I like to say, can be situational. I find that even just like doing exposures or ICBT work, even when they're not super triggered, can still be effective because it can be almost like a cope ahead. It's okay, we
Okay.
did these exposures. Now the volume's up, how can we carry over the skills and tools that we were practicing when you weren't so triggered? How can we cross apply those?
Yeah. And I think this is maybe some naivety or maybe just like being a parent and living in a germy world of the strep virus is like maybe is causing them to wash their hands. You're treating them for being sick. So is washing hands a bad thing while there's germs around?
Yes,
Right.
totally.
And yeah. So I'm also still learning about pandas and just like trying to wrap my head around, isn't it good that they're washing their hands while this strep virus is floating around? You
No,
know?
totally. Yeah, so no, this is a good example. So like during the COVID at the height of the COVID pandemic, for example, I couldn't have clients resist hand washing a lot if that was one of their big compulsions. And so what it was like, okay, we're going to do what the CDC guideline says, and we're not going to do anything more than the CDC guideline. And also we're going to give ourselves grace that we might not do it perfectly, and that's okay too. So it's like CDC guidelines but it doesn't have to be perfect. Like we have to like let it be a little bit more gray or flexible.
Yeah.
So, and then I do have some clients who are like, I know I will never not wash my hands before I eat. I will never do that. I'm like, okay, like I will honor your boundary and your limit, and we won't do that. I think it might happen in your day to day life, or it might happen at some point in your life where you don't have hand sanitizer on hand and you're hungry. What are you going to do in those circumstances? But people do have their limitations, and I think that can be respected.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I can see that. Where where is the future of OCD? Where are we headed?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I'm really excited with this inference-based CBT approach. I think that there's a lot of wonderful potential there. It is funny though, because all these practitioners are fighting about it, which I know it's always fun when there's like drama in the therapy world. They become like very political.
Right.
But it's so helpful to people. I love it. So I think that what I'm really excited about is just there being more choice in treatment methods and effective treatment methods too. Because exposure therapy can be terrifying and it's really hard on people. It's a hard therapy. Granted, it can be really effective for people, but I think everybody was always like, no, ERP is the gold standard. You have to do ERP to get better. And while I think it's such a valuable tool, I think that having more options and types of treatment can be really empowering for individuals. So I'm excited for there to just be more treatment methods for OCD. So people just have more empowered choice rather than being like, nope, this is the only one that you can do to get better.
Yeah. Yeah. That yeah, I think like with the help of social media, there's like the awareness, the research, there's
Yeah.
so much more potential for so many more things in our field, including OCD and just giving people the chance to speak up and find a
Totally.
community and find people who are like them.
Oh, yeah, the
And
connection is huge. I have a monthly support group, and everybody in that support group struggles mostly with the mental intrusive thoughts and mental kind of compulsions and superstitious thinking. And it's wonderful. It's just so we have a great time together because people get it. And it's we're able to bring humor to it too. So it's we can laugh about, oh gosh, yeah, I had this intrusive thought about flicking my dog's penis. I had this intrusive thought about whatever. And everybody can just like freely say what their intrusive thoughts are while everybody's just like, yeah, I get it. And nobody's being judged, but people feel very safe and understood. So community, I think, is super important.
yeah. What are some of are there like what are some of the numbers around like how many people have OCD?
I think that the numbers are much larger than what are reported. I think they say 1% of the population or something like that. I think it's way,
Okay.
way,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's way more because, again, like people just didn't know what it is or what it was.
Yeah.
So I think now that people are understanding more of what OCD is, now that they're like, oh, that's what I have. So I wouldn't be surprised if, yeah, I think a large portion of the population has OCD or even just will experience debilitating OCD symptoms at some point in their life. Like postpartum OCD, that one's really big. And I think that it's like the volume, like certain
Yeah.
times where lives the volume might be like clinical OCD, and sometimes it's going to be down low where you don't have OCD on a clinical level, quote unquote.
Yeah. And I think my postpartum experience was so wild. I've talked a lot about it. I've shared a lot about it, but I had a lot of thoughts about putting my hand in the garbage disposal.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I was like, what the fuck?
yeah.
What is going on? And I remember, and this is me also telling everyone, advocate for yourself in the treatment that you are seeking. And if something doesn't feel right, follow that and go somewhere else because my
Yes,
therapist was that's normal and that's anxiety. And I was like, no,
yeah. It
where
feels something else.
yeah, like I know what my anxiety feels like, and me wanting to put my hand in a garbage disposal seems a little more than
Yeah, yeah, it's a violent, intrusive thought, and then that's when we start the doubting sequence, the doubt of like, "What if I did it? What if I
yeah,
want to? What if I blah, 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 blah?" And then the story of what could happen or why we're having that intrusive thought gets so loud. It's, "Okay, you have no more blenders in the house." Like, and that's when, oh, it starts becoming really, pathological.
yeah. And I think too, just I try to normalize it for myself and also for the other people that I work with. I also have thoughts of what if my car goes off the bridge? What am I going to do if I can't get out of the car? What's going to happen to my daughter? I'm like fortunate to have learned a lot of skills and know how to navigate that. But for those of you listening, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's normal and it happens. And there are resources for you out there. And
And I
it's
always
terrifying sometimes.
It's so terrifying. I always tell my clients, all thoughts get a free pass.
Yeah.
There's not there. And I was like, I dare you try to shock me with your worst intrusive thought. Like, try. Nobody's ever shocked me. So I think it's like people always feel uniquely bad too. It's how my thoughts are different and somehow worse than other people's. Like other people's are forgivable or whatever, but mine are everybody feels different in a bad way. Like
Yeah.
I'm the exception to the rule. And so for listeners, no, you're not, you're a unique, wonderful individual person, but you're not special in a bad way. You're not the special snowflake. So I think that people, yeah, just need to know all thoughts. It's not about the thought, it's how we respond to the thought.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. I just tell mine they're weird and they need to go away.
Yep, exactly. I'm like, okay, that was
Just
interesting.
go
I'm like,
away.
that was a creative one. You're like, wow, you go.
Like,
Now I'm
must
going to
be
go
having
back
a day. Must be having a day.
Yep. Okay, that's cool. Now I'm gonna go back to drinking my coffee and just
Yeah.
hanging out. And more thoughts pop up, then great. But I'm not gonna give them power.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's so strange to verbalize it a little bit with someone who really understands it. Is, oh, I'm going to go look at all these car safety things for car seats and seatbelt cutters. And I was like, no, Ryan, what are you doing? You're
Yes,
okay.
yes,
What are you doing?
exactly. That would be the compulsive behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
You don't need this stuff. Everything's okay.
Yeah,
But again, like years later, like finally getting to that point of you don't
for
need these
sure.
things. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you feel like you're being, CD can, the compulsions can feel like you're being productive. Like I'm protecting
Yeah.
myself, protecting other people.
Mhm.
But the irony of OCD is when the more you engage in OCD, the more harm you're actually doing to yourself and others.
There it is.
Hmm.
Yeah. What's one thing that you want to leave listeners with as we wrap up?
OCD is treatable. And I think just like normalizing whatever thoughts, again, thoughts, feelings, OCD can really, obsessions can be about anything. They can be about your relationships. They can be about who you are as a person. OCD can attack literally anything under the sun. So I think just wanting to just normalize everything for anybody and know that even if you feel so uniquely different, trust me, you're not. It's OCD. It's not you.
Yeah. Where can people find you?
Yeah. So my clinic is OCD and Anxiety Center of Minnesota. And we have a lovely group of clinicians there that all specialize in OCD and use ERP, ICBT, mindfulness, all different kind of tools and skills to treat people. We're located in St. Paul, Minnesota, in the Cathedral Hill neighborhood. But yeah, but we have our website has a ton of resources on there too. We have a blog post that we try to post on regularly. We have an Instagram, ocd.mn. So we also just try to spread a lot of awareness too.
Awesome. And I'll link everything in the show notes. I have one final question.
Yes,
If you
please.
could do anything with your life and nobody knew what it was, what would you do?
Oh, I could do anything with my
And
life.
nobody knew, what would you do?
Nobody knew. What would I do? Gosh, such a good question. I would really love to build like just a beautiful OCD treatment complex,
Oh my
like
God,
a
yeah.
like a multi-million-dollar one, and then have people be able to get affordable services there. Yeah, I think I'd love to have a really beautiful with like a farm. I'd love to have. I know I'd love to have
Yeah.
a treatment complex with a little farm on the side with like goat
Yes.
stuff, and like
Yes.
chickens that we can all go play with. Yeah, so I think that would be it.
I love that. Any other final thoughts?
No, I just really appreciate you having me on, and I'm always willing to talk about OCD with anybody if they have
Okay.
questions. Yeah, it's definitely a passion of mine. So, however I can be of help to people.
Don't tempt me with a good time. I might take you up on an OCD series. So,
I would love that. Oh my gosh. Oh, I will talk your ear off.
all right.
I would love it.
Let's connect and do that because I think there's so much more information to be shared. And I think people would really embrace it and benefit from it. So,
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want to learn more or follow either of us on social media, you can find more information in the show notes. Thanks for your support and listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day.